everybody? Welcome back to another episode on The Black Experience. Happy summertime, y'all. I hope everyone is enjoying their summer. If you're working, I hope that's going well. If you're a student taking summer classes, I hope that's going well as well. Whatever you're doing, thank you so much for tuning in. I am your host here, Ermias Hagos, back with another episode in Season 4. And today, y'all, we have a very special guest with us. She is a former WW alumni. She's a proud Black Eritrean, and she was also a former AS president here at Western. So let's put our hands together and bring up Belina.
Hey.
How you doing, Belina?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Yeah.
Thank you for taking the time to come onto my podcast,
For sure.
You know?
I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. How was the drive here? I know you encountered some traffic, but was it overall good?
The drive was beautiful. Literally, Seattle summers is what everybody talks about, but Bellingham in the summer, like coming into the view, I was just like, this is priceless. Yeah, it was beautiful.
A different level, huh?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just the other week, actually, so I was telling you, I graduated a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
Feel good. Still feeling that graduation high,
Yeah, for sure.
But my cousins, they wanted to see Bellingham because they haven't seen it yet. And so we came up, and they were like, one of them, he's married recently, he has a child, and he was like, I'm actually considering moving here. That's what he said, yeah.
It's so alluring. Like, I came with my cousins actually on a trip. We stayed in a Airbnb that was a barn house.
Wow.
So they had like donkeys and sheep. There was a bunch of animals, and I was like, dang, I kind of want to do a little stint in this side of Bellingham.
Yeah?
Yeah, for sure. I get it. I get it. Yeah.
So if, let's say, like 10, 20 years down the line, let's say when you're retired, you're done with everything, you would be wanting to live in a farm.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Not like I would set it up, because I feel like that's a lot of work, but I would come stay on someone's farm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like it's in our roots,
I think it is, yeah.
My dad was a shepherd, so it's it's right there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Belina, I'd love to kick it off with, if you want to tell the audience a little bit about your background, a little bit where you grew up, and then what that looked like.
Yeah. So my parents both immigrated here from Eritrea, which is in East Africa. And my dad came here as in the middle, there was a civil war in Eritrea. And so he had come as a refugee. And then a couple years later, he went back and met my mom. They got married. And then she was like 19, I think, really young, and had me in Seattle. And we learned English together. That's like her joke. She's like, yeah, I was learning how to read English and speak it, and I was reading books to you. That's how I was learning. So very humble beginnings as far as just family and being really rooted in community. Yeah. And then I moved to the Shoreline Edmonds area, went to school there, and then came to Bellingham for school at Western.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. When you hear the word Eritrean, especially in the intro, I said proud Eritrean. How does that make you feel?
It's complex. I think I feel instantly the image that comes to my mind is just community, and we are not a very individualistic culture, so it really feels like you're one part of a larger body of people. And I think of my grandparents. I grew up with my grandparents in the house, so I just feel deeply rooted because of that. And I think that's where the pride comes. I think it's complex, and there's depth and richness in complexity, because our Eritrea, like many countries, I don't think has seen stability since its inception, since it was officially a country. And so just knowing how many people have had to leave the country because of the instability, of the violence.
Yeah.
And I'm not shy about this, but like it's a dictatorship. And yeah, I think that like that is very divisive topic. I don't know how you feel about it, like hearing that, but yeah, I think that it's complex for that reason.
Both my parents, more so my dad, is more involved with the whole movement.
Okay.
That is against the government. I'm not really political, but I see what's happening. Like I'm not like what's the word, naive to what's happening at all. And I think we could use a lot of change.
For sure.
A lot of change. I'm always like, I love that I did engineering and that I'll be finding a job here in the States. But if I get the chance, I want to go back home.
Yeah.
And do projects there, man. Because I was born there, and I came here when I was very young. I came here when I was almost 4 with my mom. So I still, even though I pretty much just grew up here, I still have that. My heart still has that like connection to back home.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel you. I feel like you're probably even more so like have that connection. And I think I definitely have the yearning more so of like, I wonder what it's like. I didn't really have an experience as a young person or an adult where I could remember what it's like to be there.
You've never gone there yourself?
When I was 3, my parents went, and then after the government, there was like a war in '98, the border war, and then after that, I never went back.
Yeah. I get pretty emotional actually. Because I'm thankful for this country and the opportunities given us to get an education and stuff, but home is always gonna be Eritrea. I feel like for both of us and for a lot of people, I think that's just where our ancestors are from, and where when we look at ourselves in the mirror, we're Eritrean.
Yeah, for sure.
So
I think it's like it's complex too. I think that actually Western, and probably like a little bit before coming to Western, was when I started to really grapple with like what is my identity. Like I'm perceived as Black by my peers, and also like amongst like the Black American community, it's like there's even more like discussion and just like trying to figure out like, what do I call myself? Like, who am I? So
So do you always feel like there's because I've felt this before too, where it's like it's a war of words of like, am I African American, am I Eritrean American, am I Black? Like, which one do I use first, in what context?
For sure.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, and Western of all places, I think because there's like so few like Black students in general, like whether that like just from the diaspora, whether you have roots in the South, whether you have roots in West, East, South Africa, or the Caribbean, or South America, like there's just there's like, we have like a couple representatives from maybe like a few places, and we're all just kind of like put together. Yeah. We come to like a BSU meeting and we're like, okay, I see my friend, I see my family, but like maybe our traditions are a little bit different. Maybe some values are a little bit different. And so it's like, it's hard.
No, big time.
Yeah.
And you've mentioned Western a few times. Let's kind of get into that. So you grew up in the kind of the shoreline Edmonds area. Of all schools, what made you pick to come here to WW?
Well, initially I wanted to, like, I'm the eldest daughter, so there was like a lot of pressure.
I know. I know that pressure.
Moment of silence for all the eldest siblings, but especially eldest daughters. Like, and then you add on like all the other intersecting identities of like being an child of immigrant, working class parents. Like there was a lot of pressure to like honor my family and like honor, especially like my grandparents who like don't speak the language and didn't know how to read. Like there's like a lot of, it's like a big deal, And so so the reason I came to Western is because, ultimately it just ended up being the best financial situation. Like being an in-state resident and paying in-state tuition. It was just like, it was the most, like, the path of least resistance, I think. And I kind of committed without knowing too much about, like, the campus community. I definitely was resistant initially to, like, especially after my first quarter, I was like, listen, Dad, like, I want to come back home. And I think there was just, like, a lot of anxiety that if I came back, did the community college thing, transferred, like, maybe she won't continue. And so we've had a lot of discussions about it since. But yeah, Western was the choice.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a similar way to, you're probably familiar with Shoreline Community College.
Yeah.
So I did my running start there a bit for, like, part-time. So I did, like, 2 classes, 3 quarters, so 6 classes. And I had a lot of friends that were, like, just do 2 years here and then 2 years at Western or whatever university and call it good. But I think my parents, on the other hand, were, like, actually similar to your parents. They were like, no, just do your 4 years there.
Literally.
You know what I mean? Grind it out.
Yeah. But yeah, that's a big part of, like, our parent, like, similar to your parents, is just like, just go do it. As long as you, like, get in and you'll figure it out.
That's it. Yeah.
You're like, okay, thanks.
Yeah. Whatever you got to go through, just do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. They're like, we survived war. We survived, like, all these things. And you're like, okay, I can do 4 years.
Yeah. I've always seen those Instagram, kind of what we were talking about before, but kind of like when your parents are talking to you, it'd be like this, like they say some certain stuff, or like, you know what I mean? And there's some truth to it, you know what I mean? Where they had to walk miles, where they had, you know.
Yeah, they're like, I walked 11 miles barefoot. There was one, like, lamp in the house that we all read under. Yeah.
There was a line on the way every day. You had to slay. But, yeah. When you, so when you first came to Western, what was kind of like your first impressions, like, in terms of the scenery? Like, did you think it was a beautiful campus, or what was those first impressions?
Yeah. I think I thought it was really pretty. I think the first time that I came here, it was kind of an overcast. For, like, it was like the orientation, like, right after not the summer orientation, but the spring orientation. And I was like, okay, there's not a lot of, like, I was definitely looking for, like, Black people, and I was definitely looking for, like, a sense of who might my community be here when I come. And so it was pretty, and I think I was just banking on, like, maybe they're just not here right now. And, like, that was kind of my first impression of, like, do I picture myself here? Like, do the people look cool? Like, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
And then also, like, what kind of programs are here? I was like, all the usual questions. So it was just, like, a lot of, like, curiosity, but also, like, a bit of apprehensiveness.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Were there like because I remember my freshman year, they had a, what's it called? But it's like an older brother, older sister type of program.
Oh.
Where one of the seniors or juniors would kind of mentor.
Oh. No, we didn't have that.
They didn't have that.
I don't think so.
It was very short-lived, just because my freshman year got cut short with the pandemic.
Oh, yeah.
So we never had a spring, but I remember they had that, and there's still a few of those seniors that graduated in 2020 that I'm still in touch with. Mousse, I don't know if he was there when you were a student, but
I don't know. Maybe.
He was an engineer too, but
Okay.
he was kind of my mentor. And yeah, did you have anyone, I guess, that kind of helped you navigate those first few years?
I don't think so.
No, it was all you.
Yeah, those first 2 years I think it was all me, and, like, I met a couple people. Like, I met my friend at one of the orientations, and I was like, cool, I'm rocking with you for the next couple years. And we became roommates. But there wasn't really any, like, person that I felt I could, like, go to ask questions. Yeah, so that's interesting to hear the difference.
Yeah, I think it's important. I hope they continue that trend of getting
Yeah.
better, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that black students come in and they're like, hey, you know what, I feel more comfortable.
For sure.
Stuff. But
For sure.
so you thought it was beautiful. You saw that it was beautiful. You did your first 2 years, and then eventually, as I stated in the intro, you became AS president, and you rose to that leadership. What was that journey like?
It's kind of funny because I think by the end of my sophomore year, I was like, okay, I haven't seen a whole lot that like makes my whole thing was like, could I picture my siblings or my cousins coming here? Like, am I gonna, since I'm gonna stay here, like, how
Right.
do I leave it better for them?
Wow.
And
Okay.
so I think that kind of became my mission. Like at the end of my sophomore year, I was working at the Alumni Association, and it was a really good time. Like I had a lot of fun working with that crew, and also I was like, I really want to work more directly with students to like bring more resources to create more access. And I worked in the Social Issues Resource Center, so there was a bit of a focus on connecting students to experiences where they could explore social justice and just start to think about life beyond Western, but also how things outside, like getting out of our bubble.
Right.
So I really feel like that was the trajectory that I was on after my sophomore year. It was, I want to make this a place that students get to have the type of enriching experiences that I feel like I was kind of able to find and create by looking really hard. And I ended up joining, I don't remember what it was called, but it was part of like the larger body of students in Washington who were doing civic engagement work. And
Oh, okay.
so
Is that the Office of Equity? Something like that?
I don't remember what it was called, but we used to like mob down to like Central Washington, Washington State University, and just meet with other students who were thinking about civic engagement at a regional and also statewide level. And from there, we got connected to a larger national body called the United States Student Association. And so Western had this really cool thing where they would fund a couple students, you would apply, and you would get to go to these conferences. So the first one that we went to, we like took one of the big SUVs that Western rents out to students.
Right.
And we drove to Irvine, California from Bellingham. So it was like a 21-hour trip, and we met like a bunch of students from like throughout the UC system, the East Coast. I don't know if we had many representatives from the South, but there was a lot of people. And that's like where I really initially felt the power of like student organizing and student change making. And there wasn't a lot of like, it was more like left leaning politics within that space. But Washington, like our specific sector was like a mix. Like we had conservative students, we had like students who were like liberal, you know, it like ran the spectrum. And we were all just kind of like having to deal with each other and like talk to each other and find some kind of like commonality or find some way to build together and kind of reconcile differences. I think what ultimately led to me becoming student body president is that desire to work with students similarly, but also like be very potent about what I wanted to see happen. And
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
that was a long answer.
No, but amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I think, leadership is not easy. And, the journey that people have to get into leadership and what that journey looks like is different for all of us. So, I mean, I'm glad you painted a picture like that. I don't think I mentioned this to you, but 3 years ago, 2021, 2022, I was the Black Student Union president.
Dope.
It was coming right out of COVID, so the whole year we wore a mask up until like 3 weeks left in the spring quarter. It was not easy, but I think the journey from there, from my freshman year to that point, my third year, was very interesting because I've always wanted to be in leadership, but a lot of fear was holding me back. And it wasn't until that COVID isolation time period hit where it gave me time to kind of reflect on myself and take time. And so, yeah, my journey to leadership was also interesting like yours. But
what was it like being student body? I'm curious to know.
That year?
Yeah, being the BSU president.
BSU president. It was a joy. It was fun. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. Yeah, it was definitely cool when people come up to you and are like, "Oh my gosh, you're BSU president, right?"
Yeah.
Yeah. We're in the events. When is my club gonna collab with yours? The Latino Student Union. All the other clubs would just say that. And we did some collabs. It was fun, but it was hard because it was the first time we knew of each other, like the 6 board members, and we didn't have 6 board members in the beginning. But it was difficult because we didn't hang out outside from the meetings. And so because we weren't really friends, some benefits to that. But we had a hard time kind of clicking. I mean, when it was showtime, it was showtime. Like we all showed up during the meetings. But it was a mixture of a lot of things. Winter was very crazy because we were in person, online, in person, online, finally in person. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah,
It was something.
You survived something too. Like, I'm like, Western was a trip, but like school in general, especially like during the pandemic, I have.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is not my reality. So.
It was something. And I mean, I'm definitely blessed and glad that I got to experience 2 quarters before that.
Yeah.
In 2019, but. Yeah, it was a different time when we came back. Because we came back and most of the seniors were graduated or either done or they transferred. And all of a sudden, my class was the junior class, so we're kind of the old heads almost.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
You just like awkwardly like, how do we function in person?
Exactly. So we kind of just thrown into leadership. We kind of had no choice. But yeah, definitely. That's very interesting. I want to transition to, now, the first time I heard your name brought up was by Vernon Damani Johnson, Dr. J. I know my viewers know him because they've listened to his show. Yeah. Shout out to you, Dr. J.
Shout out, Dr. J.
You're going to be seeing in a few hours, right?
Yeah, we're going to grab dinner later.
He had brought your name up, and someone else had brought your name up as a potential guest. And I was like, okay, sure. I mean, why not? I'm open. Who is Belina, though? So I did research on you from them. I Googled you, and I had heard that you were AS president, obviously, what we just talked about. But then I had also heard of, a hate crime incident that happened your senior year. Correct? Is that correct? Your senior year.
Yeah.
Now, for those who don't know, I'll read a little bit of the facts so that we get all the facts out of the way, and then we'll kind of get to you. But for those who don't know, and you can Google this is on online in several articles. This is national. This made national news. On November 24th, 2015, so that was Belina's senior year, WW had experienced a hate crime incident involving racist threats made against both Belina, who was AS president at the time, as well as Abby Ramos, who was the student VP for diversity, who I'm sure you know well.
She's my
She's your girl? Yeah?
That's my sis.
There we go. Shout out to you, Abby.
Shout out to Abby.
So a student had made, who's later identified, and we know his name. I'm not going to say his name, but you guys could read it in articles. I don't think we need to give him that attention. But he was later identified by he posted on Yik Yak to you, specifically targeting you, to quote unquote, let's lynch her, after he had thought that you had made a specific Facebook comment or post or whatever in response to that. So as soon as that was made, the next day classes were canceled. So the 24th, that Tuesday, classes were canceled, and then WW held a whole campus meeting. In response to that, the police contacted him on the 30th, and when they had asked him how those comments would have made you felt, he said, quote, she would feel threatened by them. But that wasn't the reaction, end quote. But he said that wasn't the reaction that he was looking for. And then he would later on, a few days later, be arrested on suspicion of malicious harassment, which is a felony, and then he would be sentenced. And that was a whole thing that happened your senior year. When I first heard about this from Dr. J and then I read about it, I was very shocked because, first of all, no one should have to experience something like that. But most importantly, this happened your senior year after you serving as AS president and what you've done and what you've brought to WW. When you think back to that event, how does that make you feel, and what are your thoughts about it today?
Yeah. Well, I think it definitely has made a forever impact on me. And I think the students that were my peers, my closest friends, like, that I think was kind of like it made a big impact.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I feel like it really slows me down. Like, I feel this sense of, like, wanting to get grounded. Like, even now I find myself just, like, speaking a little bit slower, because I can just remember, like, how painful parts of that time was, not only for me, but also just my family. And I feel like there was a lot of focus on me, but there was also just like clearly like a larger hostility towards all Black students. Like, it wasn't just that specific comment got highlighted, but there was like a lot that I think people felt comfortable, or they felt like, because maybe they wouldn't say that to your face, or like that's not something that is acceptable in public, but with like anonymity, it's like, okay, we can express ourselves. And so I feel, I don't know how I feel, to be honest. I think I'm struggling a little bit to name exactly what it is, but yeah, there was a lot of, I think shame is like something that I was feeling a lot of. Also, I felt like a lot of, I think pain and a little bit like out of control. Like, things felt like way beyond anything that I was able to conceptualize or anything that I've ever dealt with. Like, I don't know if that makes sense.
It does.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was a weird time, too, because classes got canceled on the Tuesday after. I'll also say, like, I was probably, like, one of the. Quite a few people in front of me that found out about all that stuff. Like, I was literally in the library studying with Abby, and we were just, like, I was writing an essay for an economics class, like, just very much. It was, like, very disorienting. That's I think a word that I would describe. But that Tuesday, classes got canceled, and then it was Thanksgiving break. So there was kind of like this weird, not weird, but like lack of like closure, or lack of like solidity, because we're just going to break. So I definitely came back to Thanksgiving, and I was like, I don't know what to say to anyone. Like, at that point, like, my parents were just like, we were all really disheveled. including my roommates. Like, this was the thing about that particular instance was that Yik Yak, I don't know if you know about it.
I've never had it myself, but I
Yeah.
know it's anonymous, right? Users are anonymous. Tell me about it,
Yeah.
actually.
Let me tell
might
you
know
about
it.
Yik Yak, okay? Because I remember they came our, like, spring junior year. I remember they were, like, passing out, like, merch and stuff like that. So we were just like, I don't know what this is. Like, yeah, sure, I'll take a free, water bottle. And they were really promoting this app where students can anonymously post their thoughts, secrets, kind of like, I don't think it was meant to be what it ended up being used for. It was more just to like create more connection, but like anonymously. Like, we had, I don't know if you had Facebook, but they did like a honesty box where people like leave you little messages, and it'd be like, oh, I have a crush on you or something like that, and you're like, oh my gosh, who is it? So I think it was more so like that, and then it also, the interesting thing about it is that everybody that's posting on there is like within a 5-mile radius. So you're like, oh,
Interesting.
somebody's around. Like there's somebody,
Right.
someone's around. And so that was kind of like, I think the appeal of it is that it's not quite like Twitter. It's not quite like a complete anonymous thing. It's like there's anonymity, but there's like proximity.
It's almost like a modern day. You ever seen the movies back in the day when someone would write a note to like their crush, and they wouldn't have their name on it,
Yeah,
and they would like
exactly.
pass it down in the classroom when the
That's
teachers.
exactly, yeah. I mean, that's like what was, I think, we were all like, but I never like looked into it. I think it was, they were really pushing it. But it actually ended up, Western was like what ended up happening in this particular instance that you're referring to. When I was AS president, we were like one of a couple schools who experienced something very similar with Yik Yak, is that it kind of became this like blanket, like invisible way for people to express things that were really hateful or just like saying things that without really having to experience the repercussions or the weight or feel the impact of like what you're saying to the person, right? Because like if you think about some of the stuff, not only the student that ended up getting arrested in this instance, but also like when you say something to someone in person, like there's immediately you can gauge like what is a person,
Right.
You're having like that human experience.
Exactly.
And so
Right.
I think that like in an effort to create more ways for us to connect with each other, we like also, I think we're still grappling with that now, like social media and how it connects us to people, but then also how it kind of like limits our perception of each other in a way.
Yeah. I mean, I was having this conversation yesterday with a friend of mine where social media has connected us more, but people still feel more lonely than ever before. They still feel disconnected too, despite the possible connections you can form with people all around the world. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Did you feel like, did you feel like WW responded well, or could they have done better with that incident?
In that, if I'm thinking about it from the perspective of me as a student who was like moving through that, I feel like in those like first 2 days, there was a very sincere effort to like, it was chaotic. I mean, like, I just, if I could go back and share a little bit about that time, it was like that night when the threats, I think there was like stuff happening. Also, this is just like one small slice of probably a couple months leading up to this stuff because I came out, like my campaign as president, for AS president, which I was running against somebody that I knew. I wasn't like best friends with them, but we were acquaintances. And so it was kind of like iron sharpening iron is kind of how I was looking at it. So I was like, I'm going to run on a kind of more potent message of students of color need access to resources. And I think that that's controversial. And I kind of had a sense that it would be, but also I was like, no one's really paying attention to what like we're doing in the basement. You know, Black Student Union, ACC, like these are our peers that we're going to class with, but there's kind of like this subculture almost that exists, and it's cool. And also, I think that this was like my effort of like let's bring these conversations out loud. Like let's not shy away from these moments of tension, like discomfort. Like, it's time for y'all to feel a little bit uncomfortable, like, you know? And the president of the school, like the actual president, not the student body president.
Bruce Shepard, right?
Yeah, Bruce Shepard. Yeah. He was, like, catching a bit of heat my sophomore year for something that he had said in a blog, which was, if Western is as white as it is today, it will have failed as a university. And that was, like, one line of like a much larger piece of writing that shared kind of like his attitude and intent as president, which was like Washington State is changing demographically, and like as a school we need to match up with that, you know. And I think now that that's like very like that makes sense. Like there should be like a very clear ratio, like equal ratio. But at that time, for some reason, you know, just like more radical groups kind of found that and framed it as something that was like harmful or dangerous to particularly like white students.
Wow.
And I think of like now, had that situation happened, like in the context of today, like we have a lot more. It's like way easier to just like you know, dead those kinds of you know, narratives and stuff like that, especially 100%. With TikTok. You could just be like, so these are like a small group of people who are really loud right now, but like at Western, like a lot of people are from small towns, like we're just you know. And so it just was really loud and potent. And so they came the year that I was a sophomore, and they just postered the whole school with these posters that said, diversity is white genocide.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and I don't remember who did it. Like, all we know is that, like, we're like, Bruce Shepard is like trying to create conversations around equity and black staff in particular, are trying to encourage him to like continue like going deeper, because he's you know a white man and a person in a place of power. So it's like I don't know exactly like what the relationship was like, but from the black admin and staff that I talked to, they were like, hey, like this is somebody who's kind of like trying to shift the narrative and shift things at this school. Like, let's support him. Or not support him, but let's support the message and show that like we're here. And at that time there was like students who were like, okay, yeah, props to him, props to Bruce Shepard for saying something like this, and also like let's not put so much emphasis on him, but rather like make this a bridge to listen to the most marginalized students.
Right.
Whether that's, and there were so many students who like at that point have had experiences that they've not had a platform for. They've left here with a lot of grief and pain, and so it was like, I was like, oh, they're kind of like, who are those students? Like there was a big rally. I don't know if you know about it.
I might have seen it.
It was like
or heard
called
about
the
it.
Diversity Is rally.
Right.
And so
In response to this incident.
in response to this incident, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I sang at it.
Oh.
I make music, and I remember my friend was like, Heather, she was like, hey, like, we want to really show, like, that we're, you know, standing with the message, and why don't you write a song? Because she was like, she really wanted to hear me sing and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
I remember I was, like, performing a song at this rally for essentially Bruce Shepherd. It was just, like, very trippy, but I was like, I got a message. Yeah, sure, I'll sing.
But that's your moment, though.
Yeah. So that was, like, sophomore year. And then to kind of, like, see where things landed, like, 2 years later, like,
Yeah.
I think that I think that, like, I went on a long tangent, but your original question was about
WW's response.
WW's response, and I think that there was, like, a very relational way that, like, people were reaching out, admin. So, like, I don't know if we knew quite how to, like, comprehend what was happening or, like, what was being said. At that moment, I felt a lot of fear and a lot of fear. Like, I really felt like it's not safe for me to be outside right now because we were watching the, now we downloaded Yik Yak. At that point, I hadn't had it. So I'm, like, watching all of these things come in, these messages, and it's, like, progressively getting worse. I didn't see the original comment that that student had made.
Right.
Somebody else told me about it really, really late Sunday evening. They told Abby. They were, like, a student that monitored social media, and they had said, someone said something pretty terrible, and I didn't know what it was. So the next day I come to the office that the student government, I don't remember what it was, the board. We had little offices there, and, like, the front desk person at the time, Sabrina, she was like, how are you doing, and stuff like that. And I didn't really know, like, I was kind of, like, confused, you know. I was like, oh, I heard there was, like, something was popping off on social media, or it's, like, Yik Yak, I'm not really sure. And somebody sent me some screenshots, and then there was, like, one person, Eric Alexander, he was kind of like not our mentor, but kind of, like, guided us throughout our positions on the board. And he pulled me aside and was like, hey, this is what's happening.
Yeah.
Like, how do you feel? And I think I was just like, I don't know how I'm supposed to feel. Like, what is the right thing to feel? I think that's when I started to get a little, like, it became surreal. Like, and not to say that it was, like, that conversation that really made me feel fearful, but there was one student who came in and was like, oh, are you okay? Like, it was really, like, the response and the concern from people that started to make me feel a sense of, like, oh, there's a lot that I haven't seen, and I feel really unsafe. And so I think that for how I was feeling, like, the way that I was feeling, which was, is there, like, a target on my back? Like, is there, clearly this is, like, misconstrued, because whatever response that is happening on Yik Yak or some of the stuff that I'm reading, like, it's just not warranted to, like, what I've been saying or what, like, my intention was. So I was like, but I don't know. Like, at that point, it's not far off to believe that, like, my safety was, like, in jeopardy, because students at other college campuses were getting assaulted. There was students who had been attacked by other students who were really hateful. So it's like
There was incidents all around the country.
Yeah.
That was happening. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you read about anything, but like there was specifically in Lewis and Clark, there was a student who was like physically assaulted and like was in the hospital at that time. Like we were very deeply connected to a larger body of like Black student organizers. So we kind of were like, we have no reason not to believe that this is somebody might come and find out where we are.
Yeah.
Like we live in a college town, you know. So given how unsafe I was feeling, I think that admin that were interacting with me felt, I think they did their best, but I don't, if I was, which is not fair to compare like my perspective as somebody who's like lived through something like this and also, yeah, has that lived experience as a Black woman. And I just would respond very differently. Like if a student was saying like, I'm scared to leave my house.
Yeah. You'd have a different response.
I'd have a different response.
Yeah.
And at that point, like I had had a meeting with like the head of the police for Western and President Bruce Shepard, like some of the like main admin people, and they were just like, we want to respond to this, and it's serious. Like what this student has done is like really, like we're not. It's not being taken lightly, and so I think I felt like a lot of reassurance from that those conversations that like this is being taken seriously. It's not like they really care. I think where there was like a misstep is we were then directed to talk to a police officer on campus who was like just ending his shift, I think. Like he was kind of just like, are you feeling scared? Like, are you feeling a threat? And I don't know if that particular individual had the like language, the social emotional skills to understand how to support us. And that was kind of where the like rupture, I think, happened between. Now I don't really feel like we trust the school, because why is this? He was, bless his heart, you know, like I don't think he understood either what was really happening.
That makes sense.
Yeah, like had it been there was like a main like leader or whatever. Sorry, not whatever, but the main police officer who was like in charge. I think he was much more grounded and had a grounded assessment of like what was happening versus like another police officer who was just working a solo shift. And I'm not like, I have a lot of like room for just complexity. Like I don't have like blame or anything to one particular person or group. It's just like a lot of, it was new. So
it was new. Yeah. Well, again, Belina, you know, you should not have gone through that. No one should. And I mean, first of all, again, I'll say this again and again, but it takes a lot of courage to even bring this up, you know, because again, this can be trauma, and I'm sure it was trauma for you, and you know, but you've stepped foot here, and you've discussed it, and you were able to graduate and everything. Do you feel like kind of now, like what you're doing with where you're working right now and living in South Seattle, do you feel like you've kind of moved on from that, and that's kind of, you've fully healed from that?
I wouldn't say that I've moved on. I think I take it with me. It's kind of with me wherever I go, and I think it really does ground me in what I do now. I work with an organization in South Seattle, rooted in South King County, and we specifically train and build leaders BIPOC leaders how to organize for systems change in their schools. And so it feels really purposeful and meaningful for me to be getting to like use this insight and this wisdom from this time that I was a student organizer and an activist about like what are the limits of like what you're willing to like there's always something like when you're fighting for transformative change, there's always a risk.
Of course.
Especially if you're like the institution that you're trying to make change within,
Right.
if they're not aligned or they're not fully there yet, like you're going to be perceived as like an outsider or like an outside voice. And I think that having this really extreme niche experience that I had, that is actually quite universal, I think, because what ended up happening is like doxing and like all of, I don't want to just like glide over that, but a lot of people have now like experienced that. But I think that my particular experience lends itself to the work that I do now, which is like, I still believe in organizing. I still believe in being strategic. I still believe that like we can change the systems that we interact with. And that comes through building power. That power is built through relationships, through studying our history, through being rooted in like a political education of our communities, and also understanding like how did people survive and fight through apartheid? How are people organizing now, like for the justice movement in Palestine? Like all over the world, like people are trying to make transformative change, and it's literally in like the personal connections and relationships that like we're able to make this like big change. So getting to work directly with BIPOC students, like high school students who are like, they're going to become like engineers, they're going to become artists, they're going to become anything, literally anything
they want.
And getting to have that like time with them during those formative years feels really like, I feel really grateful for. And it's like I've done some healing. I will say therapy has been a game changer for me. So it really,
That's awesome.
yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
And health insurance.
Yeah.
It's
That's needed too,
paid,
right?
Yeah.
Oh, man, that's awesome, Belina.
Yeah.
Well, Belina, as we're coming to a close, I love asking this question, just to kind of put a bow on this thing that we've created right here today. But given your experiences here at WW, in life, what you're doing with that organization today, and anything else in your life, what advice would you give to the younger generation today, or even to your younger self?
I feel like the advice I would give is find community or build community, and don't be afraid to do something that hasn't been done before, but also know that you have yet to meet like some of your best collaborators. You have yet to meet the people who might change your life, and just continue like finding and building that authentic path for yourself, and not relying on other people's perceptions or perspectives of what you should be doing. Like fight for your authenticity, I think is what I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not brief at all. I'm not a brief person. So yeah, I gave you like a
That's brief, but it's also
sentence.
like a strong one too. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
absolutely. Well, Belina, thank you for coming on the Black Experience. It's been a joy. Any last minute plugs or anything you want to shout out? Put yourself out there before we close.
No plugs.
No plugs? No nothing?
I probably have a lot, but I'm just like, I'm around, and big ups to you for this podcast.
Oh, thank you.
This is, the fact that this even exists is like dope, and I'm excited to see how you grow this, or if what the next thing is for you. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
I am too. Well, thank you. Thank you. It's
Yeah.
people like you, that's making that happen. So without the guests. So, but anyways, thank you, Belina. I hope y'all enjoyed that awesome episode. Y'all, this was a lot. A lot to take in, and sometimes, the episode can be emotional, can be a lot for people. So if you ever need, make sure to take the time for yourselves. Take care of yourselves. Take care of others. Love each other. And make sure to make that a priority this summer and on after that. So without further ado, y'all, stay tuned for more awesome episodes. Make sure to catch this episode and future episodes now on Apple Podcasts, my Instagram page, YouTube, and Spotify. Without further ado, y'all, until next time, guys, peace.
I like that.
The
Peace.
peace. It's become like a staple. What's up, y'all? Thank you so much for tuning into that video. Make sure to click that subscribe button down below, as well as that bell to get notified on every new video and short coming in the future. And check out the description down below to get links to my podcast that is now featured on both Apple Podcasts, Spotify, this YouTube channel, and my Instagram down below. And as always, until next time, guys, peace.